Good evening and welcome to Making Learning Addictive Live. This is your host and your friend, Brian Romero Smith. It's good to see you. For those that actually, I really can't see you, but it's good that you are here. It is an honor that you would decide to take some time out of your evening to join us, be it live or, if you're watching us on replay. Truly appreciate you just honoring us with your presence. So we're going to have a great conversation today. As many of you know, our family has just has gone through some learning processes over the recent suicide that was committed by our nephew, and trying to understand, where we sit, how do we look, how do we hear, how do we support. And I know that I don't have all the answers, so I just threw something out there on Twitter to see if I can get some folks to help me out, help a brother out, because we got to help each other. And I had some people to respond. So today we're actually going to have a conversation, and we're going to do this in two parts. So the first one, I want to be able to address the stigmas that are around mental health and mental health awareness. And then, later on, we're going to have a part two where we're going to jump into, the importance of going beyond SEL inside of our schools so we can make sure that all of our kids have exactly what they need to feel supported in any situation. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest for the evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. We got one more coming. He tried to get on, but popped off. But we'll see him in just a second. So I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Alicia.
Hello, I am Alicia Sewell. I am an educator who lives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Roll Tide. I am passionate about social emotional learning, mental health, and DEIJ.
All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. And go ahead, Abraham.
Hey, got you. Hey, everyone. My name is Abraham Scully. I'm the founder and CEO of Speaks to Inspire, the mental health solution for young adults suffering in silence. I'm also a best-selling author, podcaster, and most importantly, a mental health advocate, just passionate about having these honest conversations about mental health so that we all realize we could talk about it. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's what's up. While we waiting on Craig to come on board, um, Abraham, I want you to give out your information because you had a powerful talk out there on YouTube. As you were talking to some youth, in regards to mental health awareness. Is there a place where people can actually go get that information?
Absolutely. So we are, and when I say we, my company Speaks to Inspire. We are on all social media platforms, including YouTube. So we have a ton of different videos there. You can just search Speaks, the number 2, Inspire, and you'd be able to find some resources and information. We also have a website, speakstoinspire.com, for a ton of free resources that can guide you on the journey of supporting yourself or supporting others with different mental health conditions.
I'll definitely have that shared out for the audience here later on in the show. But let's go ahead and just hop into it. The, the point of us beginning this conversation with stigmas in mental health awareness is because it's real. There are a lot of people, on both sides, to either who believe that it is not good to admit that they may be going through something, or that sometimes culturally it's not good, especially as you're trying to elevate yourself in certain careers and certain levels, and even in school, because of the way students may interact with one another, that it is taboo to be able to talk about mental health issues. What are mental health stigmas, other mental health stigmas that you've heard of? And either one of you can jump on that real quick.
So I can start this off and then hand it over to you, Techie. So I think the first place to start is really understanding what stigma is. And when we can understand what it is, it better helps us to identify what stigma can look like or sound like in conversation, in media, in different mediums. So stigma is just really a negative perception towards something. right? So when we talk about depression or anxiety, stigma can be, the negative perception that we have about people with depression or anxiety or the mental illness in general. There are different types of stigma that exist. There's self stigma, just to kind of name one of them. There's also institutional stigma, there's social stigma. But essentially, it's really about understanding that stigma is, if we, put it as simple as we possibly can, it's just a negative perception towards something. And in this case, it's regarding mental health conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a disgrace, about mental health, about mental illnesses. Um and just like Abraham said, the negative talk behind, just being human,
Yeah, and we just got a Mr. Craig on. What's going on? How you doing?
How y'all doing, family? I had some technical difficulties, so I do apologize for my late arrival. But I'm gonna slide right on in. When I think about stigma, I think the fellow panelists, they all made very good points. It's always like a negative, connotation. I think what also comes with stigma is when certain things are not normalized. So you're never going to, or at least I would hope not, give somebody a hard time for having cancer, or giving somebody a hard time for having something that they can't control.
Mhm.
And I think we don't get that same grace and mercy when it comes to mental health.
Oh, that's
It's like there's physical health and there's mental health, and the two are very much, in sync.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, we were starting to dive into the why though that is behind that, but seriously, why is that?
I think a lot of it is honestly just lack of exposure. If
lack
you've
of
never seen
knowledge.
somebody, with functioning with mental health issues who are still functioning, still going to work, then to you've already have figured out what kind of person that you think they are. And just lack of exposure, lack of knowledge,
Mhm.
I think is a driving force, because a lot of people are getting their information from non-reliable sources.
Mhm.
And if you're not getting information from sources that know what they're talking about, then your view of it is always going to be a little skewed.
Mhm. And then the denial of it, thinking that, everything will be okay, it'll go away, those feelings aren't valid. And the history of being told, just pray about it.
Mm,
The history of being in the Black community where taking medication is frowned upon. Which then makes you not want to get the help that you need, or once you feel better. In my case, once I felt better, then I would stop taking the medication, not knowing that it's something that I consistently have to do for the rest of my life. So that lack of knowledge, lack of exposure, lack of being in denial about it, is really the problem that we need to face.
mm. Abraham, did you want to jump in on that real?
Yeah, so I mean, they really covered it in terms of stigma exists because we don't know what mental illness is. When we think about a physical illness, and I love how Craig mentioned cancer, but I'll just share a brief story, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. So I played high school football. I played quarterback, and I thought I was fast, right? I thought I was a fast quarterback, and I remember it was a game, an away game, a few minutes before halftime, and I decided to run the ball thinking I was fast. Little did I know I wasn't fast, and I ended up getting knocked out cold. My feet stood in one place, my body went in another direction. And long story short, that game, I broke my tibia.
Mm.
Now, I'm not going to get too graphic about what my ankle looked like and my inability to even walk off the field, but I remember, going back home from that game. And as soon as my parents saw my broken ankle, they immediately took me to the emergency room. They didn't ask me any questions. They didn't ask me, they didn't make me feel shame or guilt for the fact that I had broken my ankle. They immediately took me to help. But because when it comes to mental illness, we can't necessarily see it like we can see a broken bone. We don't
Mhm.
treat it with the same level of, like Craig said, compassion, with the same level of importance or value. But I also like to add, mental illness is not just mental, it's also physical. And it's proven in if we, do our research and see the different signs and symptoms of things like depression, things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, there are physical manifestations of these illnesses, right? And so I only know that as a result of educating myself. So when we come back to stigma, it exists because we don't know what mental illness is. But as soon as we realize that, hey, this is this, and this is how you identify it, these are the signs, these are the symptoms, there's no longer any stigma because I understand it just like I understand a broken bone. So I think, it exists mainly because of that reason. But in addition to that, no one's talking about it. And I think as a culture, we've gotten so much better as it relates to opening up about these conversations. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. A
Right.
few years ago, this wasn't common, but we're having more conversations about it, which is a beautiful thing. But I believe we can do a much greater job at continuing these conversations until it's normalized, like Craig said, to where I can come on this call with you and be like, I'm really not having a great day today. I had, a few things go on and I'm just not feeling it, but I'm here, rather than putting on this facade or putting on this mask, as if everything is great. So, we're moving towards normalizing these conversations, but it takes education and sharing our stories to really, I believe, eradicate the stigma that exists.
That's a perfect segue because in the green room we were talking about. I mean, Alicia, you were mentioning a personal struggle that you were on a journey of discovery. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Last year in March, I found out that I am bipolar, and it's something that I thought that I had just from, like you say, Abraham, educating myself. But a couple of years prior, I was misdiagnosed with just anxiety and depression, and the medication that I was given was not working. So then it made me more depressed. It made me sicker. It made me physically, it wasn't working. So I stopped going to therapy, stopped getting the help that I needed, because I was like, it's just not working. I'm basically a horrible person, and I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't fix myself. Nothing is working. And thankfully I have great people in my life who support me. So one of my friends was like, you are passionate about SEL. You're doing all this great stuff with, in the schools, you're speaking about it. You need to get help. So I went, and got the help that I needed. And when I found out, I immediately cried. I immediately called my family, just because there was such relief from just knowing what it was, and just knowing that I'm not crazy, that all of the episodes, all of the struggles, all of the suicide attempts, everything started to make sense. And it's still, a struggle, because in the Black community, you don't hear a lot of people admit that they have bipolar disorder. You don't hear a lot of Black people talking about it. There's not much education about it. And with me educating myself, because I believed that I had it, and when I was told that I didn't, I stopped. But now I'm back on that train of educating myself and knowing the signs, in others. But the journey continues. Like it's not easy to admit, because a lot of people will think you're crazy. Oh, she's crazy. Oh, if you see, movies and shows on TV, and they're in a psych ward, they're running around, they're hollering, they're screaming, and you don't know what's wrong with them. So immediately people connect bipolar disorder to being crazy. And it's also something that I had to educate my family on. I will admit, my mama, she's like, you take too much medication. You don't need this, you don't need that. That's what, she started out speaking that way years and years ago. But now, it's changed. My family's educating themselves. My friends have educated themselves. So it definitely it's been a struggle, and it takes a lot of work. Just putting myself out there and sharing that. But thankfully things are changing. but it was definitely a hard journey, especially with the suicide attempts and, everything else in life that happens that derails you from time to time.
Yeah, and thank you first of all, for being transparent and vulnerable enough to share that with us. That just brings up another piece of the conversation that we were talking about in the green room. Abraham, you mentioned our good friend Kanye. In regards to the things that we're seeing in the public eye, and we've got people on both sides, but truthfully, something is going on with them. So how do we deal with that? When we look at some of our cultural icons, but then people connect with what's going on and they still are afraid to reach out for support and help. Oh, that was a question.
That's for me. Man, so I have an opinion about this, and those of you watching, those of you here may agree or disagree, but I think, at least for those of us who have watched the documentary that I was mentioning in the green room with Kanye and his story, his experience dealing with mental illness, I think that's a lot of people's story. The only difference is he's a celebrity. And so when he has his episodes, when he's going through it, everybody sees that. Everybody knows, versus the person who is suffering in silence, the person who is, locked up in their room having an episode. So I think it goes back to what Craig was saying. And I mean, Craig hit it on the head when he said compassion. When individuals are dealing with mental illness, whether it's diagnosed or not, I think the greatest thing that we can do is to have compassion, is to listen, to understand what they're experiencing. And a lot of times they don't receive that compassion. And so it almost feels like, well, I'm by myself. No one understands. No one cares to understand. So it doesn't make any sense to even be here any longer. So I think, for a lot of people, it is hard to open up and seek support, even though they are obviously struggling and they obviously need that help. But I think as gatekeepers, as friends, as family members, just being there as a source of support, offering that compassion, offering a listening ear, just, letting that individual know, like, I may not understand your experience. I probably don't know how to help you, but I'm here to listen. Like, I want you to share, like, tell me more, and let's get help together. And I'll just throw this out there, since we're talking, briefly about suicide. There is a national suicide prevention lifeline or hotline. It's 1-800-273-8255. And I also like to share, like, whether you are considering suicide or not, and thanks for dropping that in there, whether you're considering suicide or not, even if you just feel lonely, if it's 3 a.m. in the morning and you don't have anyone to talk to because everybody's asleep, or you feel like you have no one that cares to know what you're dealing with, this is a great resource just to tap into, and you get, free access, 24/7 access to a crisis counselor at any time, so that's a resource as well. But I think, the biggest thing is showing that compassion, being compassionate.
So Craig, I'm gonna ask you a question in regards to that, because, we're just bringing Kanye back in there. I'm only doing that because, as we all mentioned, or Abraham mentioned, that he's a celebrity, and we're seeing different sides of reaction, and a lot of it is on the negative aspect, to some of the things that is on public display. Question is, does that hurt or harm cultural understanding or need to actually admit when something is actually going on?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And, when you think about Kanye, like, I grew up on Kanye. I remember being in middle school when the College Dropout came on, and 28 years old to this day, still bumping it. So the thing about celebrities is, whether it's a music video or songs we hear, like, we invite them into our home. And because we relate to them so much, whether it be a lyric or a show, we kind of feel like we got some autonomy in speaking about, how they move in the world. And I think with Kanye and his episodes, it's a shocking because it's Kanye West, but we all have people in our lives who have exhibited similar behavior. But because they're not Kanye, it's just Uncle Joe being Uncle Joe. Or it's just
crazy.
Exactly. You know how she is.
Yeah.
Versus Kanye is being bold enough to say, hey, this is, for lack of a better word, like my label, this is what I have going on. Like that level of vulnerability, we don't really see in the Black community because for generations and generations, we have been conditioned to just push, and never really take time to reset. So Kanye doing it so publicly, coming from a culture where we don't talk about that, it's not a thing, we don't do that, it's kind of like working backwards. So I would dare to say like he's really courageous, and I would dare to say that his episodes are shedding light and normalizing so many things and attributes of people that we love and care about, but they're not Kanye, so we don't hold them to that same standard, or we don't hold them, to that same level of shame. So I think a Black celebrity like Kanye just being so vocal, it's really made a difference, and it's really kind of helps open up a new conversation, a new can of worms, because it's a point of reference. And we don't really have too many, Black people in our community from a celebrity standpoint up to recently who have spoken out on these concepts.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff for real. So, all right. So let me pose it in this way then. Now we're talking about adults here. What about our youth? Our students, who don't necessarily know how to articulate, what's going on. What is some advice, or what are some ways that we can actually see what's going on, hear what's going on, but also advocate for them speaking up as well? Anybody can jump in on that.
I think one way is forming relationships with that's why forming relationships with your students is so important. Because you start to recognize, especially when you suffer from it yourself, you recognize different, traits, different things that they're doing, the way they talk, the way they speak about themselves. So building those relationships are important, and advocating for them no matter what. And not always assuming that they're bad, that there's something behind the actions, that there is something behind the tantrums, the episodes, and advocating for those students, alongside the family. Because sometimes the family doesn't know. And that's not something that we as teachers can discuss with families, but you can seek the help, as an educator, social worker, counselor. And I know some therapists, I know some schools in the system I used to work, there are therapists that come to the schools and helps students. So the building relationships is important, because if that child can come to you and speak to you about things that are bothering them, then you can change that child's life. But if there's no relationship, if there's no rapport, if there's no trust, then nothing's going to change. The child it's just going to excel into adulthood.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump on that?
Definitely, Techie. You hit the nail on the head with that one. Relationships are a foundation of this work. And if kids don't know you, they're not going to trust you to be vulnerable. They're not going to trust themselves to be vulnerable with you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where advocacy comes into place. As a school counselor, I do a lot of guidance lessons and going into the classroom and talking about what stress might look like. Anxiety is you clicking your pen, or other things that you have just been conditioned to believe, oh, that's just how I am. I'll be completely transparent. I didn't know what anxiety was until I started my graduate program, and I realized my whole life I've had anxiety and did not get diagnosed until I was 25, 26. So I think the best, and my cousin who's actually in the chat right now, I remember he told me the best thing you can give somebody is something that you never had. And, we do that by pushing this knowledge and this information to our kids and breaking it down to a level that's digestible and to a level that they can receive it. We don't need no gargantuan lexicons to say, you're stressed. We don't have to be on, some high and mighty throne to say you're anxious. We just have to break it down to a level that they can receive it. And if we struggle with that, that's where consultation comes in, right? Mm-hmm. That's where we ask a teacher, we ask a principal, we ask a therapist, we ask a school counselor. because this is heavy work that we're doing, and no one person can do it alone. And I genuinely believe it takes a village to help our next generation be a lot more in tune with their emotions.
Mm-hmm. And it's important too to educate educators on what it looks like, so they can know the signs and then take the steps to help that student. Because a lot of times teachers are dealing with that too, or educators are dealing with it too, but we don't know it. You know what I'm saying? Because we're not educated on it. So having someone come into the school to speak about it would be very beneficial.
So Abraham, you do that. So go ahead, talk about it.
So, and this is such rich information, like, man, from relationships to education. I think that's powerful. The one thing that kept coming to mind for me is you don't have to be an expert to help. Many educators and those who are stakeholders or gatekeepers, they almost stay silent because they're fearful of, what if this is the case? What do I do then? I'm not equipped. I didn't go to school for this. I didn't that. But the truth is, you don't have to be an expert to help. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about listening, but Techie and Craig hit it on the head. You know, you don't have to be an expert to build a relationship. You just have to care. Right. Yep. And then you don't have to build a relationship to provide education. It just takes a little bit of intention. Right. And so in Speaks to Inspire, what we do, our mission is to eradicate mental health stigma and support the well-being of our young adults. And the way we do that is through storytelling and education. Just what you all have said without you knowing anything about Speaks to Inspire. Storytelling, what does that do? That builds a connection. If I share my story with you, you now see, whoa, I've been there before. I'm there right now. And you can connect with me in a meaningful way. And then after I connect with you, I'm gonna hit you with some knowledge, right? And you trust me enough to receive what I'm saying because I've opened up and shared my story. And I love what Craig mentioned about, you don't have to use these technical terms. You don't have to make it complicated. Stress is stress, right? And so one of the biggest things that we do is we provide the language. One of the greatest things my therapist did for me, and I love to share this openly. I see a therapist at least once a month. And it's because I got a lot happening. I got a lot going on, and I prioritize my mental health because I am a priority. I take care of me, and that's the only way I'm going to be able to be there for others. And so my mental health is a priority. So when I'm going through seasons, I book more sessions with my therapist. But as of right now, I do at least once a month. Sometimes we laughing, sometimes we crying, but I'm at least having that outlet to release and share. But one of the greatest things my therapist ever did for me was she gave me, and this is some good stuff right here. I would take some notes right here or Google it. My therapist introduced me to a feelings wheel. I had no idea what that was. Growing up, I thought I could only get angry and only be happy. I didn't know there was a such thing as secondary emotions, tertiary emotions. I didn't know you could feel betrayal. I didn't know you can feel sad. I didn't know any of that. I thought you were just angry and happy. That's it. And when my therapist introduced me to a feelings wheel that has a ton of different feelings that you can identify with, I was like, whoa. So actually right now, I'm not upset. I'm hurt. Like right now, I'm not angry. I'm sad. I feel betrayed. I feel abandoned. And I was able to have the language that connected to what I was feeling. And I think a lot of students, a lot of young adults, they don't have the language. And so they just say, I'm this or I'm that, or it shows up in a certain way versus, hey, I'm actually hurt right now. Perfect. There we go. Like I'm hurt right now, or I feel devalued. And so if somebody comes up to you and they're like, yo, I feel devalued, like, let's have a conversation about that versus like, I'm just upset. Like I want to fight, And I think this is a powerful tool because it's now giving our young adults the language to now recognize what they're feeling and then to articulate that to those who can actually help and support. And I believe that's any of us. So I would say, you know, that's the first thing: education, storytelling, and that's how we build those connections and support our young adults.
Dude, I wish we had a whole lot more time. What all of you have brought to this conversation is it's been helpful. Let me just start there. It's been helpful, you know, as someone, as a father who is learning, you know, how to support, you know, my own children who struggle with anxiety and depression, but also supporting my family who's just witnessed, you know, family member, you know, committing suicide. You know, this is helpful. This is for me. I'm being a little bit selfish, you know, with these conversations that, you know, that we've been having lately, because I need the help. But I also realize that I'm not alone. We're not alone. You're not alone. And those folks that are listening, you're not alone. And we want to make sure that you realize that you're not. Everything that was shared today is useful. I like the feelings wheel. I've never heard of that, you know, before. So I will be sharing this. I will say this, you know, I do want to really jump into, and we don't have enough time to do that today, but, you know, we have people who are fighting against social emotional learning being implemented inside of our schools. We're connecting it to so many things, you know. And I'm gonna do this in front of everybody. I would love to invite y'all back to talk about that aspect, you know, because, you know, what they don't realize is that it's impacting our, not only our students, but it's impacting our teachers who are going through right now. We're really going through. I mean, can I put y'all on blast and ask you to come, you know, back to talk about that?
Yeah, we'd love to.
Let's do it.
Okay, y'all heard it. Okay. Y'all heard them say it. So if y'all don't see them, I'm gonna give y'all all their Twitter handles so y'all can go after them, you know, for that. But I really want to thank you guys for, you know, just this piece of the conversation. This was super helpful for me, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope that you got something out of it, you know, as well. Y'all, we need each other. We truly need each other. So please make sure that, you know, we mentioned the suicide prevention hotline. You know, it's available if you need somebody to talk to. But guess what? If you're listening on Twitter, LinkedIn, you know, Facebook, whatever the case is, I'm here too. You know, and if you need somebody to talk to, give me a holler. Don't even hesitate. I'm here for you. Guys, thank you for joining the Making Learning Addictive show. I promise you that we'll be back next week. Oh, I didn't tell y'all a date. I'll get with y'all later on that. But yo, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see y'all on the other side. Thanks again for joining us. If you're watching it on replay, make sure that you also share with other folks, because this is some good information that we all need. We love y'all, and we see y'all next time.